Hi, everybody. It's nice to see you. This is just a little bit of an impromptu live, and I have my thumbnail image. I have my pot holders, so I can take a break and do a little bit of a live stream because I owe my mother pot holders. You can see I've been doing all of these quilted pot holders for the last week or two, and they're finally done. And the other batch is in the washing machine downstairs, so I can do a little bit of video sharing that I have been meaning to do. And it has to do with a video clip that I posted, I think yesterday, originally from my friend Steffers had shared it with me. And I think the original one is about 7 minutes long, and I've edited it down to about 2.5 minutes. So feel free to watch the longer version or watch the one that I put up. But essentially, the reason I wanted to talk about it, because I think, again, my understanding of sort of the thing that we're in or how it may be unfolding is has a different frame than a lot of other people. And so I just wanted to articulate again within the context of that clip, how that is and why. And I think the clip offers a really good example of how to talk about it. And it's sort of, again, are we in the brave new world? Are we in 1984? And I still feel like many of the people online are imagining this as perpetual 1984. And my position is that there will be spurts of 1984 authoritarianism, but much more of it moving forward will invite us to participate in the situation because ultimately the system at large doesn't have the resources to keep everybody in a forcible alignment. They would really far prefer people to participate on their own, of their own free will. And so that's the brave new world side. And so I could be wrong, and I'm not telling anybody that they have to adopt my positionality, and I'm not in any way trying to dismiss harm that has been done in other, or saying that there won't be harm moving forward. But I think the idea of complexity and emergence is really at the core. And, I'd be interested if because I'm really kind of off the feeds these days, if there are other people that you're listening to who are talking about Web3, token engineering, and this idea of complex nonlinear systems and emergence, because within those systems, the idea of choice architecture is really central. And so if you align with the idea that what this is about is complexity, complex systems, and sort of a global superorganism that is dynamic, that is potentially computational, then the authoritarian, we're going to tell everybody what to do and erase your individuality, it doesn't actually, it's inconsistent. And that's what I'm trying to point out. So you kind of have, well, there's probably more than two choices, but at least two sort of main choices in how to think about it. And one is confinement, restriction, flattening, homogeneity, authoritarian. And the other is complex systems and choice theory under surveillance and monitoring, which is not to say that there won't be any guidance built into the system, but that the novelty of what the emergent behavior might be is it's what's actually desired. And so those are two sort of foundationally different ways to approach it. And I'm not saying that mine is the right way, but it's important to, like, I've run into a number of people in the comments who don't understand that the Georgia Guidestones philosophy is fundamentally incompatible with complexity. And again, I'm not saying I'm an advocate of complexity or I think this is a great thing and there's no problem with it. I'm simply looking at it as a system and saying, like, we should talk about it and understand the structure, because if we don't understand the structure, we're going to be subject to being vulnerable to manipulation and missteps. And so why not try to reduce those if possible? So the clip itself is, it features, I think it's from like a documentary. I'm trying to remember the guy's name. He did the hypernormalization one, but it was at the machine wall watched over by Machines of Loving Grace. It was a clip from that. And it was featuring essentially a programmer, and his name is Loren Carpenter, Loren Carpenter, as it's spelled. And so in the clip, Loren Carpenter talks about, and I will say, I initially titled it wrong. I thought it was at Burning Man. This actually happened at sigraph. And Jason, I apologize for the confusion there. But sigraph is a conference of graphic design professionals who do computer programming. So all of like the CGI stuff that's evolved since then. But this was very early. This was in 1991. And so there was this large conference, and he had, I guess it was supposed to be some sort of like shed kind of room. And the room was set up with a row down the middle, like chairs in lines, like an auditorium. There's a wide row down the middle that divided the room into two parts. Two rectangular lines of chairs, and on each chair was a paddle. And on one side of the paddle, the tip was red, and on the other side of the paddle, the tip was green. And so people participating in the conferences, then they went in the room and they found their seats and they sat down. And what Lauren Carpenter said, now I will say, in addition to, so he started out with Lauren Carpenter working at Boeing on simulation modeling engineering for Boeing. And then he ended up becoming the co-founder of Pixar. And I've talked a lot about Edwin Catmull and the University of Utah and Pixar and Disney and what Salt Lake City represents, okay? So Lauren Carpenter, like that's his backstory, sort of Boeing, Pixar, and now he's one of the chief scientists at IONS, the Institute of Noetic Sciences, okay? So Carpenter is looking back and he's talking about this experiment. These people come into the room, there's several hundreds of people. They sit down, they're figuring out the paddle. And he said, oh, look, they're noticing that there's a screen in the front of the room. And depending on how they put the paddle, like there's a reaction on the screen. And so the people realize that this is participatory gaming. Okay. Now, if you've listened to the talks Jason and I have done on Michael Matthias, I really believe that the new form of quantum computation is fundamentally based in social interaction or interaction of humans in the environment, resonating with the field through our biology, which is the fascia, liquid crystalline fascia. And we have a nice talk that's coming up. Jason's editing it. That's a first in a long series about fascia. But our biology is going to be used to do computational work, and it's going to be done in group environments, and it's going to involve our biofield, our energy field, and how we interrelate with one another. Okay. And so this interconnection, and it's about frequency and oscillation. And I do believe that the technologies that are being developed, these engineered nanoparticles, are about creating an interface to either siphon off or mirror the data that we're creating while we're participating in these activities, in these like live action role play games. But this was a very early example. So there's not a lot of dramatic reenactment or costuming or cosplay here. It's simply like computer geeks going and sitting down in a chair and picking up a paddle. But it's participatory, and they're figuring it out, right? So they're looking at the screen and they're going, oh, I see this is interactive. And it's not just me individually interacting with the screen. It's us as a group. And the game is Pong. And so I don't know the ages of you guys, but I remember having the first Atari Pong game. And my friend Washington Sean, he's done a lot of research into Atari and sort of the background of the gaming systems. But my dad, my late father, like he had bought the little console with the little turn dials, right? And you're playing, whoop, and and the paddles go up and down, woo, slow motion. The ball goes over, and then you have to get the paddle aligned to the ball. So they were setting up a game of Pong where one side of the room was one paddle in unison, and the other side of the room was the other paddle on the opposite side in unison, right? So they were a collective mind. That was the goal, that they were a collective mind. And what Carpenter said was that if the ball was coming and green meant the paddle went up and the ball was going to hit midway, not everybody could do green because the paddle would go up too high, right? So in the group, some of the people doing the paddle would have to do red, even though most were doing green, to keep it in the right zone, right? And there wasn't time for everybody to communicate, and they couldn't even actually see each other because they were looking at the screen. But somehow they became entangled in an energetic field that they were able to successfully play the game. And somebody left a comment underneath saying, like, I remember that, I was there. In fact, you had to unplug the game and turn it off because nobody wanted to stop playing. Like nobody would intentionally lose. And it was such a coordinated game that no one was losing the game. And so eventually they gave up and moved on to the flight simulator. So I think that's really interesting. And so my point in the 1984 versus Brave New World, what Lauren Carpenter was saying is that they had attained a consensus, right? There was a goal for each move. The goal was that the paddle would be in a certain direction, where it was low on the thing or high on the machine, the screen, or somewhere in between. There was a consensus on where the paddle should be. And through their own field, they got the paddle to where it should be. That's a goal, right? It's a very simple goal. Actually, maybe not so simple, like when you're talking about 100 people being coordinated to get the paddle to the right place. But they had almost like a telepathic field that enabled them to do this. And he said, we don't know how it happened, but it was a consensus. And that consensus is the Ethereum tokens. There is a signal, there is an oscillation that is emitted for coordinated group behavior. And what I'm saying is, I think the intention is to network our biology as individual agents in a global superorganism. That's what Oliver Reiser has talked about. That's coordinated through electromagnetism, maybe through quantum entanglement, and that will achieve some sort of goal-oriented behavior. Now, I've been doing a lot of research this past week about quantum psychiatry and this idea of us existing in a many worlds theory scenario in which all of the different choice architectures of our different potentialities exist in superposition. And so if you've seen the movie, I've talked about it several times, Everything Everywhere All at Once, Evelyn, the protagonist in the laundromat, there are sequences where it like slips through super fast of all the different versions of Evelyn. And so what I believe, like my current hypothesis, is that these folks like Jeffrey Yass at Susquehanna Investment Group, who are behind the school choice movement, among others, right? But they're their choice, right? Choice theory, school choice, funding school choice. Now it's being framed from a political ideology standpoint. But he's also not just interested in school choice, but liquid voting and futarchy and this token engineering, right? He and Lubin and Ethereum and Consensus, they're working on the wisdom of the crowd. That's what they call it, the wisdom of the crowd. Like individual agents won't know really the bigger picture, but they'll have their intuitive grasp and they will participate and some consensus will be reached. And like the Pong game, the feeling is the paddle will show up in the right position at the right time, the goal-oriented behavior. Okay, now again, I'm not co-signing this. I'm not saying that people should be assigned a digital identity number and a pile of tokens and told to play a game. I'm simply saying I think this is my theory at this point, that this is what's happening. So if you follow along the lines of many worlds theory in superposition, right? And your sensing apparatus keeps you grounded in the reality in which you understand it, right? And that's why you have a blood-brain barrier and a retinal barrier and everything to keep your sensing in this reality. Alison McDowell, you are currently belonging in this reality. Now, I've been looking at other things where there are things involved with lipids and people who have breaks in what they understand as reality and other things start bleeding through. And there are biological things that I think will be manipulated. But if you were interested in the wisdom of the crowd, and that's the goal for some sort of puzzle solving or computational purpose, there's a logic to it. Why would you stop with the Alison McDowell that's sitting in the McDowell living room right now, when if you could navigate it and chart it, you could possibly access every version of Alison that made all the other choices? And that's like these Evelyns and Everything Everywhere All at Once. Wouldn't you want all the Evelyns to do the wisdom of the crowd? Wouldn't you want everything? And so I feel like the emphasis on mental health and live action role play gaming and spatial computing and altered states of consciousness, like this is all going together in terms of getting layers and layers and layers of data and information for pattern and problem solving. So where am I going with this? So my challenge is that Lauren Carpenter got people to go in the room, right? So they were already part of a certain cohort. Now I'm looking at this Maniac series from Netflix from 2018, and there's so much. Like I'm Like I'm just making this huge map with all these scenes about lipids and everything. Pretty much at this point, if you Google lipids and any word in the universe, there will be a match. So lipids and everything in the Maniac TV series is what I'm looking at right now. And there's this whole emphasis on family and loyalty to the family. And this one guy is outcast from his family. He doesn't fit in. But I'm realizing that family, I think, is actually mathematical set theory. And so this is about like quantum entanglement and quantum game theory. And this is what we're doing with our biology. So, but you've to get people to play the quantum entanglement computing game, you have to get them to go first to the conference. You have to get them to go to the sigraph conference. And then when they're at the conference, you have to get them to come to your session and walk in the door. And then when they walk in the door, now he didn't tell them any of the rules. They figured the rules out themselves. And that's how these games are structured, is that they're supposed to be like self-tutoring. You trial and error, and then you figure the rules out as you go along, which I think is how this is built, this augmented reality game. And then once you're in, look, you've picked up a paddle and you feel you have a choice. Look, I can be red or I can be green. I'm empowered. I'm an empowered agent in the game. And this is cellular automated. This is John von Neumann. This is like, what is your neighbor doing? Is your neighbor doing red or green, right? There's this aspect of us, but we believe that we are independent actors. We are independent actors, and yet we are within a field, an energetic oral biofield that is working collectively towards a goal. And I think that is how the system, and again, I don't know who the they is, and my placeholder just for purposes is the interdimensional biofilm, right? Because I think that's kind of funny, but maybe not so far off. Like, I don't know what all of the computations are, but I think that that's the aspect of it. And so they would like for you to go to the conference, and because you identify with this group, I identify with a group of, high-level computer programmers, graphic designers, and then you go in the room. And once you're in the room, then you feel like you have a choice, but ultimately your choice is red or green. And actually, when you went in the room, you didn't know what the game was. Maybe you didn't even know it was a game. Maybe you thought someone was going to give a lecture, only it turned out you were in the middle of a gaming experiment. And then once you joined a team, now these people didn't know. I mean, I'm sure some of them knew each other, but it's like 100 people on each side of the room. So it's not like you know everybody and that you're already invested in which team you're on. You just went in and sat down on a side, but all of a sudden you're a team. Right. And then you get competitive because you want to win. Right. And we're drawn into that. And we're drawn into our participation, both individually and collectively, that we want to achieve. Right. Because that's the human drive. Right. We want to belong and we want to be successful. And they know that. I mean, the system knows that those are inherent human qualities. Like, nobody wants to be alone and cast out and unsuccessful, although some of us are more likely than others to walk off the edge of the map. So they're counting on that. And I feel like that is the Brave New World piece, is you feel like you've made a choice by going to the conference and going to the room and picking up the paddle. And look, I have a paddle and I have a choice. But ultimately, the rooms are decided by the narratives and the stories that are told about setting up the teams. And so that's what I would suggest, is as we're navigating digital society and socio-technical systems, is that are we in agreement about the game that is being played and what the conditions are the game, the terms under which the rules of the games will change, and what the winners get and what happens to the losers? Like, do we actually know this game? Because these people didn't, but they immediately grokked to what the game was and they wanted to win, right? And then how do they get you in the room? And so you can imagine in this computing, this Gaia fascia, mechanotransduction interdimensional computing system, that you might have infinite numbers of rooms of people with infinite interests and identities to join in, right? And so if you have a room that you want to appeal to, progressive California techno utopians, you tell them a certain story to get them. And they might just be like, oh, I'm so looking forward to going to that session in that room, right? Because those are my people. And you go in there and sit down and then you play, right? And no one says, maybe you have the yellow and purple paddles, right? No one says like, oh, I only got 2 choices. I don't get 10 choices. And that's why, I've talked a little bit with Jason about this idea of control, because again, everyone's very focused on how much control there is. And I would say ultimately, Now it's going to be hard within the Gaia fascia. Like eventually we're all going to the conference. There's not going to be a place for the people who don't want to go to the Gaia fascia conference because it's run from space. So it's going to be hard to make the choice to not go to the Gaia fascia conference. But then, like, can you mill around in the lobby and never pick up a paddle so that you have all the choices? Because once you pick a room, you're going to have two choices and you're going to be put on a team. Right. And so all of these different things, whether you're, a classic conservative libertarian, or you're, a progressive utopist, or you're an alternative wellness biohacker, or, like all of those rooms are going to be out there for you to play in and be on a team. And I would say in this framework, I feel like most people are going to be okay in the rooms. Like, again, they're going to shake stuff up and there's going to be bad things that happen. And in history, there are always bad things that happen. I mean, I'm not trying to dismiss the bad things that happen, but there's always been bad things that happen, right? And so I feel like, and this is again my hypothesis, and I'm willing to be wrong and revisit, and this is my position now, but I think they would far more like for us to go into the room of our own free will and join a team and be excited to be on the team, and that has to do, again, even with like the rooms could be aligned with online influencers, right? Or online influencer communities, or online bulletin boards, or, all of these things, like that you belong and that you want to be there and you feel good about being there and playing, and competitive, maybe even in playing, because that's going to be an optimum, processing system, nodes of processing. And then there's going to be some people who are wandering around in the lobby because they know that going into a room, even though it seems like a choice, is actually going to limit their choice. And so that's the thing I'm trying to put forward, for your consideration as we navigate these digital spaces, is this idea of an interconnected, quantum computing system accessing the wisdom of the crowd in superposition realities that may ultimately attempt to use our biology and our consciousness, to suppress, on the one side, to enhance our individual choice and make us feel like a heroic individual in this archetypal gaming environment, but to harness it to the quote unquote collective computation, and the collective being computational, not political, ideological. And it's all about choice, but it's limited choice. Once you make the choice to go in, then your choices start to narrow and narrow and narrow. But if you feel like you don't mind having narrow choices and you're okay with that, then you are. And I'm not here to tell you you're a bad person because you went in the room. I used to get frustrated with that. and I still get a little irked about it sometimes, but ultimately we all get to choose. Except for the fact that we're probably all going to be sent to the Gaia Fascia conference eventually, and we should talk about what that means. So I think that's mostly what I wanted to talk about. Again, like, they didn't know what game they were in, but they were more than happy to play it. So yeah, and I would just say, like, at the end, somebody just like found my ancient blockchain video, the little cartoon one I did, and they're like, "So what is our solution?" And I would just say, there is no one right solution for everyone. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, what occupies my time is trying to understand the system as best I can and understand the concepts and the ideas behind it. But I don't think there is one answer. And I think, it's to our own individual experience and ingenuity to sort of figure out which right next thing to do for ourselves. So I hope that helps. And I'm going to pin the clip to that Lauren Carpenter discussion there. Again, the backdrop to all of this is complex emergent behavior that is supposedly horizontal. This feeds into this sort of libertarian / anarchist, anarcho-capitalist framing. And that we are choosing in that, and that it's a horizontal thing where we are agents, and that links to the cellular automata. So, well, and I see there's someone here, someone's saying, I don't want to be routed into a funnel and told how to operate. And Loretta, I would say at this point, you're not understanding what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, like, ultimately the one routing might be that we all have to go to the conference, but they're going to offer you many choices. That's what people are not getting, Loretta. Like, I need you to listen to me here. It's about choice, right? So ultimately, the big choice is it may be very difficult for us to stay off the game board entirely. Okay, so foundationally, we could have a problem with that. And I think that we need to have a conversation to say, is this where we're at? Like before we turn the world into a live action role play game board, there are consequences, and there should be a place for us that don't want to be part of the Gaia Fascia gaming system, computational gaming, quantum gaming system. And now, realistically, they've already set up all the infrastructure. That's what the Cold War was about. That's what the satellite systems were about. That's what the nanoparticles are about. That is that thing. But I would say, ultimately, if we are intact with our consciousness, like our consciousness and our biology, I think trumps all of the other technologies. Literally, I do. I mean, I think that we have our connection to the creative force of the universe, however you understand that, as God, whatever your connection is, we are connected to that. That is our birthright that is internalized to our soul and our body. So this other technology that they're doing, I'm not to dismiss it or to say that it hasn't hurt people, but ultimately it's not the good technology. We're the good technology if we're steering our own boat. Like if we know enough to be grounded in our own bodies, in our own minds, to try to like hold on to ourselves and our own consciousness. Now, it's not easy because there's a whole lot of noise out there, right? And I'm sure some people would consider my stuff noise. So I'm not saying that I'm not noise. To some people I'll be noise, and to some people I won't be noise, right? But you have to do what feels right to you. And then I think in standing firmly in that space of knowing that we have that divine connection to the field, it's about oscillation. Like these nanoparticles are about oscillating on vibratory frequencies. And I think that our biology can trump that if we can hold on to that space. And not just be buffeted around and told stories. Again, the role of story is really important. And I think that's what's been happening in the social media space is they've got all of this data. They've got all of this data about everyone, and they know exactly what story to tell you to get you to go in the room. And they know whether they want to stroke your ego or scare you or tell you, peer pressure. They have dialed it in. I mean, they've got 10 or 15 years of data on most people to know, boop, boop, boop. Like they can play you like an organ in any moment to get you to go in the room. And you thought it was your idea, right? Because you love libertarian policy, or, you love free markets, or you love community currency, or you love these things. And those are your people. And you go in there. And then you have the red paddle or the green paddle or the yellow or the purple or the blue or the orange. And you're like, I'm choosing the thing. Look at me. But ultimately, somebody else built the room for you to participate. And some of you ultimately, like, I'm not even here to say that participating in the quantum computation puzzle is the most terrible thing ever. Maybe it's okay. I don't know why we're doing this puzzle. Honestly, I don't know what the thing is behind it. I would say at the base, we don't have informed consent. And that's where I'm at. We don't have informed consent, and you're using manipulative, it's asymmetrical warfare in that the system and the AI system and the Web3 token system are able to manipulate our signals and confuse our signals and use stigmergy and digital pheromones to pull us into situations that we might not otherwise choose. And that's not fair, and that's not right. And especially with vulnerable populations and children and nature, we shouldn't be doing that. But anyway, so just think about it. Look at the Lauren Carpenter clip, see about the Pong, see about the collective unconscious, because actually, Steffers were collaborating on sort of a deconstruction of this Maniac Netflix TV series from 2018, which seems to be total steganography of all of this stuff. And the last name of one of the key characters is Landenberg or whatever. And it references a guy who's doing quantum game theory in Rochester. And he was a controversial professor because he was talking about that, I guess, a moral philosophy experiment about is it rape if the person is unconscious and there's no physical harm, right? And of course, that's a terrible thing to imagine, but that was sort of the thing he was known for. But think about it moving forward, this idea of using an unconscious body for a purpose that is non-consensual. And think about Melanie Swan and this idea of using blockchain cloud mines and saying an early way in is that you can rent your unused brainwave cycles while you sleep for computational processing, right? That's not that different, right? It's a physical, like, again, maybe you will agree to it because you need a UBI or something like that. But the idea of using like an unconscious body, because we are connected to the field, we are the supreme technology. Like when they hit their Moore's law level, they need to go inside of our biology. And so that has very profound implications. And again, it goes back to Rome and this idea of using people as oracles, using children as oracles to get into the field. So anyway, I hope you find this interesting. And again, just consider this idea of complexity and emergence versus authoritarian flattening of identity. Because I think what they want to do is they want to make you think that their game is to flatten identity and tell you everything to do, so you'll run into the room that they actually want you to run into already. Whether that's the libertarian room or the alt health influencer room or like whatever those rooms are. I think they're going to set up a really scary story to make you run the other direction, and then other direction that you're running may be like online influencers peddling nutraceuticals that have nano in them, but you trust those people because they're in your room, they're your people, you've learned to trust them, and so of course you're going to take nano aligned supplements, detox from them because they're your people, right? Like, so just think about like the whole parental thing. You tell kids something that they can't do and then they run to go do it, and that's sort of where we're at. So anyway, I'm just going to close out here and I'll post the clip. So definitely check out and look up Loren Carpenter, Loren Carpenter, and now he's at IONS. So they're working on all of the noetic sciences. Anyway, take care, everybody. Bye-bye.